Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Marstream, your performance broadcast platform. I'm Stephanie Weisman, Artistic Director and founder of The Marsh and Marstream, and tonight I'm welcoming Margie O'Driscoll to Stephanie's Marstream. But first, please consider supporting Marstream with a tax-deductible donation to the tip jar or join our membership program. Tonight's tips are all matched. So your $10 is 20, your 20 is 40, your 100 is 200. Well, also, please subscribe to the Marsh's YouTube channel and be notified when our shows go live. You can see all our past shows on archive shows at themarsh.org. Let's welcome Margie O'Driscoll, the amazing Margie O'Driscoll. Margie, who is my friend and has been, I think, for 30 years. And all those 30 years, she has worked in the nonprofit sector. She's been a project manager, an executive director, a board member, and volunteer for the last decade. She was the executive director of the American Institute of Architects. She's taught at Stanford, San Francisco State University, and co-curated architectural exhibitions and written for a variety of newspapers and magazines. She currently serves as Vice President of the Association of Architectural Organizations and the Advisory Committee of Walk SF, Project Word, and City Car Share. Hello, Margie O'Driscoll. How are you?
I'm great. Stephanie, how are you?
I'm good. Well, it's quite a night, don't you think?
I'm trying not to check my phone. So if somebody has really great news, feel free to throw it in the chat box so we can all cheer together. Wait, I'm sorry. Am I being sort of partisan here or something?
Well, you probably are not going to cheer for certain things, and you probably will cheer for certain other things. Is that correct?
I'm a hopeless optimist, so yes.
So what does it feel like to be here on this night, this very night of this election voting debacle?
Well, I have to say, I think that the vice president now, but soon to be president, really said it right when he said we really have to count the votes before we come to a determination. But I think what I've been so fascinated about is just these razor thin margins within the country, which really, to me, and this is not going to come as news to anyone else, they indicate this deep divide in our country. And so really we're all focused right now on who's going to become the president, but really there's all this incredible hard work that we all have to do as individuals to try and heal this country and move forward together, because it can't lay on one man's shoulders to change the ethos of an entire nation. And it really seems to me we need to do that today more than ever.
That is such a positive way of putting it. I mean, I look at it and I say, how could people vote for a person who does these things?
I think that's hard. And I think that we all need to spend a lot of time talking and trying to understand why people feel this way. Because there's a lot of people who feel like they've been left out of the conversation, and thus don't even bother to vote, or feel like the only way that they can express themselves is through really extreme emotion, which is, the sort of violence or the threat of violence, or some sort of activity which pulls us apart as a nation, as opposed to bringing us together. So like I said, I think we all have a lot of work to do on this, to really listen deeply and try and shift the conversation.
I agree. So tell us a little bit about your political background before we get to the fact that you, after all these years of serving arts and artists, have become an artist. But tell me a little bit of what has led up to this stuff.
Well, I've always been very political. I came from a really political family. My great uncle was the governor of Wisconsin, very conservative Republican governor, need I say. And then there was this sort of split off in my family of pretty much everyone who left Wisconsin a couple who remained, but most everyone who left Wisconsin ended up being hyper liberal Democrats. So I grew up in a family where the idea of not voting was simply inconceivable, where we knocked on doors, hung signs in windows, and really participated in the political process. And much to the chagrin of my sons, that's been their growing up experience as well.
And I know that when I met you, or right after I met you all those years ago, you have were the mayor's liaison to the arts for Art Agnos. And what was that like? How did that, how did
Um,
that impact you?
So it's really funny that you asked that question. So when Art Agnos first asked me to come and work on his staff, I thought it was like going off to the evil departure end of the universe. And I was sort of going to the dark side by actually working in government. And I told him that, probably a little more polished and politic than that. And he said simply, well, you know what? Why don't you give it a try and just see if you can actually make change? So I thought, okay, well, I'll give it a go. And he said, just give us 3 months. And about 14 days later, or 17 days later, was the Loma Prieta earthquake on October 17th. And it was this really unique moment for San Francisco, sort of a crisis situation for everybody. We didn't really know and have the level of communication that we have now. So we didn't know how serious it was and what it all meant for the city. And I saw this opportunity to actually work with an elected official and actually make change. And at the end of that process, by the time we finished negotiating with FEMA in 1989 through 1990, we made every arts organization what we called whole. So all those organizations which had months and months of people not filling their theaters, sounds familiar, and so many people who were hurting, we made everybody whole by the end of the year through a combination of federal money and also philanthropic dollars. And so it led me to believe that there were actually things you could do on the inside that you can't necessarily do on the outside.
So, from that perspective, how do you think we're all doing right now in terms of keeping the arts whole, and moving toward that during the pandemic?
Well, I think in our lifetime, we've never seen such a difficult period. I think there's nothing that in my lifetime, at least, that compares with this. So I think that the focus of the mayor and certainly the governor were really on keeping people safe and believing the epidemiologists and the health department experts about the seriousness of the pandemic. So, it's hard for us to all to remember, but, we were among the first cities, if not the first city in the United States to essentially quarantine. And our mayor was dragged through the coals for that. And people said, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. Now, whatever it is, 8, 10 months later, we're seeing that San Francisco has had consistently the lowest positivity rate of any major city in the country. And so I think that has to do with stepping in early. Also, who the people are in San Francisco, and we'll maybe talk about that a little bit more, and our experience of weathering the AIDS epidemic made us believe in science and made us believe in those things. So from a overall health perspective, I think San Francisco's done, and our political leaders have done really an outstanding job. They're human, they made mistakes, but I think by and large, we were so lucky to have the leaders we had. I think the arts are going to survive, and I think they're going to come out of this period in a different place. I think that there's a lot of organizations which may not survive this period, and that's really painful for me. But again, as the eternal optimist, I think that some amazing things have already arisen from this really terrible time. So I remain optimistic, although this is a very difficult time. I think restaurants and the arts are those places where we come to be together, to touch, to share our passion with each other, and we're not able to do that. And I know that I, and probably many people who are here with us now, are just feeling deeply in loss about this, and feeling a lot of pain around not having the vibrant art scene, which helps define our community.
Yes. So I gave a little bit of a bio of you, which really doesn't take us to the present, I don't think, and what you're doing. So, and We're going to still get to the artwork, you, Margie O'Driscoll, as artist, but still let's lead up to it a little bit more. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now and, after you left AIA, what you've been doing since then.
So I've been working sort of at the intersection of design and public policy. I'm not an artist. I'm not an architect. I'm not any of those creative things, but I love to work with really creative people. So I've worked with a variety of different organizations looking at issues like climate change, how we construct buildings. And so I have a lot of really terrific and wonderful clients. And I think that when we went into quarantine in March, I started to really think deeply about how could I serve the community in this particular moment? I'm not a nurse. There was nothing I could do to save a life. But I started to ask myself, was there something that I could do to be of service in this really particularly difficult time? So I reached out to you, Stephanie, and about a dozen of some of the most admired nonprofit organizations in San Francisco, I'd have to say, and I'm including the Marsh in that list. And I said, hey, is there something I can do to help you right now, to help you develop your strategy and figure out how you're going to respond? So you and I had a number of conversations about, can we gather, can we not? What would it be like to work with the health department? I talked with other people about things like, what are we going to do about our budget? What are we going to do about public activity? How long will this last? That was like the big question that everyone was grappling with in March and April. Is everything going to be fine in June? I mean, there was a lot of thinking that was going to happen. I spent a lot of time with both executive directors and budget leaders saying, this is going to go on a while. You need to brace yourself for a longer period and start to think about how you can serve a community in new ways. And so while I didn't always have those ideas about the how, I could help walk people through the ideas which could help them problem solve themselves. And so I felt like I was of help to people in that really upside down time that we all had in those first 2 months when we were in quarantine.
You are always a help, Margie. Always, always, always. You've always been a help to me. Important thing. I've needed a lot of help, and I thank you for it. So what is tell us a little bit about your interest in design, how you ended up the executive director of AIA, and now, I don't know if you're still are you still vice president of the Association of Architectural Organizations? Are you
No,
still working with them?
I still am. Yeah. I find that after I've served on a board or even volunteered, I'm sort of in it for life for anyone that I've worked with. So that's a great joy. I have just always loved to be around really creative people. I've never really considered myself an artist. So I'm flattered that you think I might be. I think of myself more as a documenter of sort of capturing what I'm seeing, as opposed to somebody who's truly proficient in the arts. And I've always loved to work with creative people. So that's always been the joy that I've had.
But the design element, what got you interested in architectural and buildings and design? Or
Uh,
how
you know,
are you,
say it again.
or how are you interested in the design and the interrelationship, I'm sure, of the design and the city and, all the different aspects of the world?
So I've always been an urbanist. I've always loved cities. I love to look at the layers of cities. I love the history of cities. I went to Barcelona many, many years ago, and I read and I brought with me an 800-page book that was written by the New York art critic. And as all my friends were laying on the beach, I would read them sections of this book and try and explain it. And they were like, "You're such a geek." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm really fair skinned. I can't really sit in the sun, but I can read you these interpretation that this amazing author Robert Hughes did about the city that we were seeing." And they're like, "Yeah, when we get off the beach." But to me, it was all about trying to understand why were buildings built like that, and to be perfectly frank, there were, ways that cities have been constructed, which have responded to pandemics and epidemics over time. So it's kind of interesting now to think about how those things will shape what the city looks like today and tomorrow going forward. And so that's what kind of got me on this sort of time of observing all these changes which were happening in San Francisco and just walking around the city. And I just started snapping photographs on my phone of just like, what was I seeing? So anything that I saw in, after about March 7th of 2020 that I never would have seen the year before was fodder for this Instagram feed that I built up, like every change that we just saw. And then by way of doing that, capturing what was happening so that when things get back to normal, we can say, oh yeah, remember when we always had to wear masks everywhere? There will come a time when we don't have to do this. But right now we can't imagine leaving the house without them. Well, at least here in San Francisco, I think there are places where other people may not feel like that, but we all seem to be following that in San Francisco. So then you start to wonder, okay, why are most people in San Francisco wearing masks? Like why here and not in other places? What is it about the people? What is it about how we care about each other that's different about San Francisco than it might be about some other places in the United States today?
I mean, this goes back, and I know that when I was at SUNY Buffalo, I moved right. I went to school right when they built the new campus, and they always talked about how the buildings, the dorms that they built, were built for post-riot purposes. So it would be harder for the students to riot and everything, and that the buildings were actually set up that way for that. I wonder if they're wearing masks in Buffalo.
I wouldn't know that answer to that question, but after 9/11, there was a whole school of architecture which is looking at how you could create buildings that, bomb blasts would have less effect on, that would be protected from, say, a truck with explosives penetrating the skin of a building or the exterior of a building. There was a whole lot of sort of defensiveness to me, which was about how to construct buildings that were defensive, which to me sort of begged the question of, okay, why aren't we dealing with why this is all happening in our culture, as opposed to trying to insulate ourselves further by the way that we build buildings? Let's unpack why this violence is happening and spend more time and more energy thinking about that than thicker concrete walls to prevent people from possibly blowing up a building.
Did you figure out the question about why people are wearing masks in San Francisco?
I don't have an answer, but here's one of the things that I do think was very different about San Francisco's response to the pandemic than most other places in the country, which is that we have all, I'm sure every person on this call, and if you've been in San Francisco for a long time, you remember the pain and the horror of the AIDS epidemic, and how in the beginning we didn't know how AIDS was spread. I mean, this is going back a really long time. We didn't know, and there were lots of thinking. And then once we started to understand enough about the science, we could actually then figure out, okay, what can communities do to protect themselves? And it was a community of gay men, but also other people in our community who are deeply impacted by AIDS. And so that memory, that pain that we all felt, made us have a respect for the public health department here in the work of scientists and the very cautious but protective way that they wrapped us in their cocoon of both knowledge. And let me just say, this was knowledge, but also of a certainty of what we needed to do. And I think that we respected the public health department in a way that many other cities really don't respect their public health department and don't give those people great credence. And I think we did here. And I think our mayor, and then of course the governor, who had lived through the AIDS epidemic here, being a San Franciscan himself. I mean, so we remembered this so intimately. And we also knew very deeply in our hearts that we had to protect everybody, not just ourselves. We had to protect everyone. And the way that we lived our lives would protect everyone as a society, as opposed to just me. And I think that was a difference here in San Francisco than other places where, people didn't feel that sense of community protectiveness.
Yeah. All right, so tell us about your project. You said you've talked a little bit about it, but let's move forward and tell us your project. What is
So
it called? Does it
I
have?
don't really have a name for it, but you know what? I'd love anybody who's participating today to give me a really great, give me a great name. So let me give you just some background here. So I love to walk. So I'm quite a flaneur, a traveler, a walker through the city. I regularly log 4 to 5 miles a day, and I live in the heart of the city. So pretty much any direction I go, east, north, west, I'm in a new neighborhood of San Francisco. So I just started walking around, and what I started to see in April of this year was the first posters, which came out, and I'll show you some later iterations of those. But the first posters came out, and I sort of tracked them to a CCA professor named Juan Carlos Rodriguez and his roommates Felipe Garcia and Marcelo Pardo Ariza. And they started out taking like 16 by 22 sheets of paper with the following words on it: "This is weird without you." And they wheat pasted them all over the Mission District because they lived in the Mission, and I live in the Mission. And so I started seeing them popping up, and I was like, okay, this is just really crazy. Like, where are these coming from? You're totally capturing how I'm feeling in this particular moment. And with that, it was sort of like Mission District artists and businesses woke up and just said, okay, we've boarded up all of our windows. How can we start to create life on the streets for people? Now, mind you, not many people are walking around the streets, but the business owners, some of them are inside their businesses. So people are moving around, but very surreptitiously. I mean, people are very cautious out there. So anyway, what I want to show you today are a bunch of photographs of murals which have happened over the last 7 months in San Francisco. There were many organizations which were part of creating these sort of murals which showed up. They're Paint the Void, Artivism, 100 Days of Action, Art for Essential Workers. So these sort of groups came in who helped find places for artists to do their work. I don't have the names of all the artists. Some of these pieces don't have names on them. Some of them are, actually, many of them are gone now because they're painted over or they've been rechanged. If anybody knows of the names of the artists, please let me know, and I'll make sure to try and tag them, because sometimes these works are tagged and I can't ever find out who's a part of that. So I want to apologize in advance for anyone I missed. Please just correct me. Called this San Francisco's urban life during the pandemic. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is what many of us were feeling in March and April and May, which is gratitude. And we're going to start out with one of my favorite pieces, which is a wheat paste in color. It's of a woman, it's unnamed, and it's by the artist Fiddle Thief. And for me, this just so captures this particular moment. There's this gesture in her face, of course, masked, of pain, of joy, of seeking release. And to me, this really captures the moment that we're in. The next picture I want to show you actually is a young artist named Oro Christo's portrait of his dad, Zenobio, who's a sanitation worker here in San Francisco. And this was done with 100 Days of Action and Art for Essential Workers. And so this was a photograph of his dad, which he put up from 1968. And it was a way of saying thank you to all those people who did that really heavy, hard lifting of taking away our trash. And trust me, we have a lot of trash right now, right? And you think about the increase in Amazon boxes and all the compost, because we're all living at home. And so all the waste is going on the compost. So just a huge shout out to those people who come and take away our trash at 6 a.m. The next image is of somebody who older San Franciscans will know. This is Brownie Mary. Brownie Mary fueled many people who were sick with AIDS during the AIDS epidemic with her marijuana-laced brownies. And so this is a real ode to like old San Franciscans with this poster, which was framed around her called Fight COVID-19 with Kindness and Brownies. Got lots of graffiti all around this, but Brownie Mary remains strong. So just, I really love that particular image. And finally, we're going to look at an image now of thank you to our working class, which is a thank you to all those people who are delivering boxes all the time for all of us. The next section I want to talk about is sort of the next part of how we were all feeling. You might remember, maybe you don't, but in the beginning, we weren't sure if wearing masks was a good idea. And then Dr. Fauci came in and said, yes, you will wear masks, and that is a really good thing. So the next sort of section of the images I want to show you is called Stay Safe. And so in early April, we saw this first image. Again, you'll remember that we didn't have enough PPE. You had major hospitals who didn't have masks or gloves. And so there was a request for people to donate them. And so this was one of the very first images that I saw in April with the whole idea of giving your PPE to the hospitals. So the next image is two famous people in San Francisco history. These are, were called the twins. They were Marion and Vivian Brown. They died in 2013 and 2014. They dressed alike, walked alike, and ate at exactly the same speed. And they were sort of these icons who you know, Richard Branson from Virgin Airways sort of captured them, and others did in their ads. And so here they are carrying signs saying, stay safe and stay home. This is on Green Arcade, right at the corner of Market and Gough Street in San Francisco. So that mural is actually still there. I just walked by it the other day. The next image is one that just stopped me in my tracks, just made me laugh out loud. So here you have this very staid sort of sandwich billboard sign on the sidewalk, stay safe San Francisco. And then I got closer and I just burst out laughing at somebody who wrote, gonna ask my mom if that offer to slap me into next year is still on the table. And it so cracked me up. I was like, that's what my mom would have said. I'm gonna slap you into next year and be like, yeah, I'm on that. Can we just get to 2021? So this one just made me laugh out loud. Okay, we're gonna look at one now that's on 14th Street. This is really interesting. So this is a building which is painted black, and someone is coming and repeatedly taking chalk and keeping this wear a mask. This sign has been up there for 7 months, not graffitied, not touched, and simply replaced all this time. So this whole idea of wear a mask, to me, was a part of that community reinforcement of this is what you will do. You will wear a mask, and we're gonna have community support, and we're gonna have community pressure to do that, because I put money on the fact that in these cities where people aren't wearing masks, they're not seeing people in the community actually putting up signs like this. And you're gonna see a couple of more really interesting ones. Can we see the next slide, please? This is in Patricia's Green, which is in Hayes Valley. It's a park there. This is done by Dana Albany, the artist who designed this. I don't know if put the mask on it, but it's inspired by the Buddhist figure Tara. And also Maria, who was the robot in the 1927 film Metropolis. And so this is a very large sculpture, it's probably 20 feet high. And so I'm not quite sure how somebody got that mask up there, but I totally love the fact that they did it. Could we have the next slide? So this is in the Haight. It's still there, this great piece called Relax, Think COVID-Free Thoughts for Well-Being. Again, part of that community support of staying safe. So much a part of this period is staying safe and countering and facing our own anxieties of things that are going on in our own lives. And next. Okay, so this is a really interesting, this is another wheat board interpretation. There were a whole bunch of these which came out in the summer. They're about, I'd say about 24 inches tall. And so they've adopted this sort of Italian plague type idea of this sort of mask that has that sort of long nose, that long figure, but then updated it with this high-tech suit, and then carrying a bouquet of flowers, which I sort of love. Anyway, so I thought this was a super interesting, and there's also plastic gloves, which you might not be able to see too well. Anyway, I thought this was so fascinating. this sort of interpretation of both a historical response to the epidemic and then something so terribly current in how we were all thinking. The next slide, please. This is another interpretation of the wear mask. So I'm not sure how much of this you can see, but the words on this are actually from the Alameda County Public Health Department. It's from a 1918 warning about how to save your life and wear a mask during the 1918 epidemic, which was then sort of countered with these like really interesting drawings, including how to wear a mask, which include, you know, a birthday hat, an actual mask, tattooing. Anyway, so all those different interpretations, which I thought were really clever and interesting. The next slide, please. This is Trashbot. So this image, this sort of pink image with the open mouth shows up in a lot of different interpretations in San Francisco, but this was one that I really loved of his work, which is just, thank you, Dr. Fauci. You know, Dr. Fauci played a more controversial role during the AIDS epidemic here. At resisting some of the alternative treatments that people were so desperate on, but he's certainly been the hero of the hour here in this particular moment. Next slide. This is an ode to nurses. It's on Haight Street. Both my sons date nurses, so I spent a lot of time thinking and talking about with nurses and nursing students during this particular period. And I think that this historic image, which is on a tattoo parlor, couldn't have captured it more beautifully. Next slide. This is in Hayes Valley. This is a really wonderful image of a bear sewing a mask in the middle of a snowy forest. Yeah, it's not really San Francisco, but there was something so really elegant and beautiful about this piece that I really wanted to capture that. Next slide, please. So these suddenly appeared about 2 months ago, all around the Mission and the Castro. And these were photographs that were featured on the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence saying, wear a mask. And they just appeared on street poles all around. So not in windows, not on plywood murals, not anywhere. They just appeared. And now most of them have gone because as with anything, they just don't last very long. But they were supported in part by Supervisor Mandelman, who is a supervisor for this district, and of course the sisters. And I think this is just another way that the community is reinforcing this wear a mask message. The sisters, in all their beauty and frivolity and bigness, I guess that's the only way you can talk about the sisters, really capturing this sort of community, wear a mask, take care of yourself and your community, is really quite beautiful. Okay, so then I think the next slide is, we miss you. I think there's this element to what we've all been feeling about missing being together, missing touching each other, missing being in the theater together, missing seeing art together, eating together, drinking, all those things. And so I'm going to show you some pictures which capture the we miss you moments right now in San Francisco. So this one totally cracked me up. It was something, if you've ever had like a 5-year-old in your life, this is the kind of stuff that they totally love. And I just thought it was just so sweet. Like, I care about you a lot. And every time I passed that, it was just so really loving. And that was seen in the Castro. Next. This is another one in the Castro that I just really loved. In case you can't read it, it says, "Oh, Brad, I just want to touch your face again." And I feel like this whole idea of touch, especially for people who live alone, is something that it is so missing right now. We are so used to being affectionate, I think, with the people, not just the people we live with, but with people in our community, of shaking hands, kissing each other, hugging, and to not be able to do that loss of human touch, I think, is really profound. And I think that the people I know who live alone are really feeling this so acutely. And I thought this particular mural really captured that. Okay, next image. This is a champagne bar in Hayes Valley. And I think there's something so elegant about the way that they did this design. This is Seabot who did this one. And it says, "See you soon, old friend." And I think the part that makes me tear up every time I walk by is now this place is closed permanently. So let's look at the next image. This is on Church Street, a really elegant response to in Spanish, we love you. We miss you. Next image. This was put out, the Hope to Catch Up Soon, again, super clever and witty. This was put out by the Restaurant Association. So this appeared in many restaurants throughout San Francisco as people were opening up primarily for takeout. Next slide. This is, I believe, by those first people who started this whole movement, and it's called Miss Seeing Your Face. And there were many of these which popped up, but none quite so beautiful as all these different images which came out around people. And this was on a shop called Lolo. It's a women's clothing store, Valencia Street, right near the Marsh. So let's look at the next one. This is from a group called Art for Essential Workers. And this is something that you saw in a lot of restaurants because they were like, we have no idea when we're going to be open. We have no idea. But somehow it captured the sense of timelessness that we all had. Remember how like days seemed to, like an hour seemed to take a week. And then sometimes an hour seemed like 10 minutes. And time took on a whole new dimension, especially in the beginnings of quarantine. The next thing I want to show you is, I think, Losing My Mind. Is that the next slide? Yeah. So there's a lot of this sort of, I'm losing my mind, which is another part of the emotion that we all had during this really super crazy period. So I'm going to show you some of the crazy images from Losing My Mind. So let's look at the first one. I don't know who did this. I think it's Rena who's there. I don't know, but this just seems to really capture that sense of like craziness, which we have going on for so many of us right now. Let's look at the next one. So you'll see this one and the next one are both about missing life as it used to be. So there's this one and then the next one. Have you seen my mind? I really like that one. And these are just ones that somebody was just putting up on light poles throughout San Francisco, and then somebody took them down. I don't know if it's Public Works, I don't know, but they would all sort of disappear after some period of time. Okay, this one popped up all over town. Again, I have no idea what this is really about. I have no idea who Weird Lady is. I think that my sons who were living here for a while, both thought for a while that I was that weird lady. I don't really know what this is about, but it just sort of made sense in this particular moment. And then we're going to end with another unsigned image, which for dog owners, you might be horrified by this. I thought it was pretty darn funny when I first saw that. I want to shift now from the sort of humorous aspects to something much more serious that was done quite intensely here in San Francisco and in Oakland. So we'll start with looking at some images from the Black Lives Matter movement. I could do 150 images of the work that has been created during this period, and I'm simply going to show you two of my personal favorites. So let's look at the first image. This is an image of Nelson Mandela. This is the artist you can see here. He's actually retouching this piece now. It had been graffitied over, and then he's now retouching it in this image. When I was out taking these photographs over time, I developed this personal hierarchy of like the best photos I felt like I could take were photos where the artist was actually working on the mural. That was like the best photo. The second best photo was people interacting somehow with the photo. In other words, someone walking by in a mask or interacting somehow with the art, and then other times it was just simply capturing it. So this to me was capturing one of the most beautiful pieces of the time, somebody who I think is just an amazing hero of our time. And watching the artist, even though he's retouching it, was just really quite wonderful. And this was done by 100 Days of Action and Pablito something. And this next one is in Hayes Valley as well. And and it says, there is no liberation without Black, trans, queer, disabled people. And I love the inclusivity of that idea. I love the way that it's designed. I just love everything about this. I love the gaze of the person in the center of it. And to me, it's one of the most powerful images of that time. There are many, many other images of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, so many people, so much about say their names. Like I said, I could do an entire show about that. So I don't want for a second for you to think that there isn't amazing work by all of those, about all of that time that we had. I'm going to switch gear from that real intense, the intensity of this work to just some other urban life shots. So this next image of urban life is on a bar, and I have no idea what this all means, but I love this idea of this masked person holding a super large martini in their hands, trying to drink through a mask. And for any of us who've like tried to eat or drink out, like that whole like, oh my God, no, I have to actually move the mask to drink is just really funny. And I love the fact that it's 99 cents. Like, I don't really know what this is about, but there's something so wonderful in the execution of this piece. The next piece was an homage which came up during Pride Month, which to me, I was so sad because I live so close to Castro to not get to celebrate all that fun of Pride, of just the party, the celebrations, the whole city comes alive and we become this magnet for the world. And you know, it was us. I mean, not that we're not all beautiful, but you know, it just really wasn't what it could have been. And so this by Luminova, one of my favorite sort of mural makers during this period, captures so many heroes of that time. And I just want to give a shout out to the sadness of not having the Pride Parade and not having all that celebration here, but there were some beautiful moments which have been captured as part of this. Much of this mural has been dismantled now. It's on Market Street right near Castro. I think maybe Harvey Milk may be the only image that remains there. Okay, let's look at the next one. Yeah, so this is a really interesting image. So the man in the center is done by Jeremy Novi. And he called this piece Icarus. And it's then beneath it is this design nerd piece called Fish Blood. I don't really understand what it's all about, but I can tell you a little bit about the myth of Icarus because it's actually super interesting. In Greek mythology, Icarus has these wings which are made of wax and feathers, and Icarus flies too close to the sun, essentially defying the laws of man and nature. And he's burned by the sun and collapses and falls into the sea. And so it sparked that idiom that some of us might know called "Don't fly too close to the sun." And to me, there was something so poignant about looking and thinking about that myth and this incredibly beautiful piece during this time of COVID pandemic. Okay, next image. Okay, so this is also one of my favorite artists of this period, a woman named A Millionaire. At least I think it's a woman. So what's interesting about this image is that it's a woman and she's got these bike gears above her head. And it makes me remember that as I walked through San Francisco, the only places which I encountered, which always, every single time I walked by them, had a line in front of the stores, were bike shops. And to me, that was an amazing outcome of this pandemic period. Was people are getting on their bikes. So people were walking like me, but people were also getting on their bikes and they needed tires and gears and wanted to fix up that old bike. So to me, that it's a great moment and hopefully a change for our city of more people getting out and biking. So it's just such a striking image as well. Okay, let's look at the next one. So this is another little vignette about San Francisco. So we have a archbishop here who had a whole demonstration trying to demand the right for people to worship together in churches, which was outlawed by the city. And so he required all the churches in San Francisco to have this sign in front of them saying, "We are essential, free the mass." Despite the fact they had sort of online masses for people, he wanted people to come together. And this is on Mission Dolores, the iconic mission in San Francisco. And so I thought, this is just a moment in time that we'll never see again. Okay, let's look at the next image. So this is Dolores Park, with these 6-foot circles, and then hearts within them, which were done as sort of a fundraising drive. And you can see people were pretty much sticking in their little bubbles. And I find, even though I live near Dolores Park, people are mostly sticking in those bubbles, even today. So that's a powerful statement about our community. This is another image by the same woman who did the twins. I think it's a woman, I'm not sure. It's at Green Arcade, and this was called "You Make Me Feel Mighty Real." I can almost hear that song when I see this image, and seeing it with the mask seems all the more poignant. Let's go on to the next one. So this is an image of a rabbit. And again, this was how do I prioritize these photos I get? This one, guy delivering food to a restaurant in front of this mural just sort of captured Valencia Street in 2020. So let's look at the next image. This is Jay Heron designing a mural about San Francisco in the Castro. And we can go on to the next one. On the first day that San Francisco allowed some streets to close and restaurants to do outdoor dining, I went up to the farmer's market up on 22nd and Valencia Street. And as I walked back, I saw these 2 little masked girls on the street playing, I think they're sisters, playing these instruments. It's the only time I've ever seen them. And I just thought, okay, this is just not something I saw in 2019. These sweet little girls. And what I realized, I was standing with this whole group of people and we're like, oh, we have to give them money. None of us were carrying cash anymore because everything we ever pay for, we have to pay with a credit card. So nobody had any money, and we knew they did not have a square to take a credit card payment for many of us. So let's look at the next image. Okay, so this is really a favorite of mine. This is Harrington's Gallery at 18th and Valencia. And these are found pieces by Fiona, who owns Harrington Gallery, Sam Hayner, Christy Hagley, and Marcy. And they created this sort of parklet. They don't really sell anything there. It's just kind of a place to sit. And it's one of the cleverest and most beautiful parklet walls I've seen yet in San Francisco. And I was one of the first, and what you can't see on the other side of it is they have an homage to RBG on these sort of barrels on the other side. So highly recommend stopping by to look at that if you're walking out on Valencia Street. Okay, we're almost to the end. This is the last section here called Messages. And these are just some messages that you see. So this, of course, the Halloween thing, it's all a bunch of hocus pocus. Somehow that speaks to the election. It speaks to so many things going on in our lives right now. Then this one on Bill Graham Auditorium, which is, of course, now been all changed over to be an election headquarters, but this fabulous John Lewis quote, "The time is always right to do what is right." And lastly, I think the last image, oh no, this isn't the last one. This one, I could do, again, a whole series on that guy in the White House, who's currently in the White House, on electioneering. I mean, there are just hundreds and hundreds of images around this, but this was the only one I saw that looked like this, that really sort of captured my attention. And then we have, I think, the last image, setting my alarm to 2021.
That was I love seeing those. Thank you. It's amazing. How many photos do you think you have
I probably have over 700.
Wow.
No, they're not all good. So
you've got nothing on my Apple photos. I hate to tell you, I must have 6,000 of them. And talk about not good. But I'm glad you have a greater percentage of good ones. But of course, didn't put them on in a car driving 70 miles per hour while you're driving. I mean, I wasn't driving, but anyway, these were so great. And it's such a, it's kind of talks about the times in a way that art can. And I think that kind of lives, leads to, what is the role of the arts? As someone with the Marsh and, as a artistic director of the Marsh and the leader of direction with my wonderful staff and performers and helper and advisors and all that stuff, where is it for the arts and the artists and how to move forward through these times and to do what, how important are we during this time?
Yeah, and I think that I love living in the city. I love happening to come across this art and going to museums and galleries and visiting my friends who are artists, and experiencing live theater, live dance, that all that opportunity, and to suddenly not have that be a part of my life. It actually felt like my heart was sort of pained. I really have to say, during the pandemic. And so once I discovered that people were kind of taking it upon themselves, like those little girls playing music, and other people were just like, I'm just going to make this, I need to make this happen. I felt like such joy about it. Caution, of course, not being too close to other people, but also feeling like, wow, art is still in this horrible time managing to be creative and beautiful and meaningful and witty and elegant, all of those things together. And I think the way that you've adapted with the Marsh, going online, like just putting it out there, is so powerful and so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, because you are, this is, you have been an artist here, in a documentary fashion of documenting, but you're using your eye to take photos and be intrigued by things, and and to capture them. And I see whatever the book or the next whatever digital thing they call it on digitalis world, right?
Yeah.
So in a sense, have you done this before?
No, this is the first time that I've done this. And I have to say that the other part of what I started to do was every day write something, since quarantine. I write something that I saw or observed or read that was different today than anything had ever been before. So it's not a journal of everything happening, but rather here are the odd things which we encountered, which we saw, which we had to worry about. Here's what people are thinking. So, ultimately someday it would be great to put some of these images together with that text, because it does all fit together. But that'd be kind of a big project, and yeah, I need someone to pack me away for about 3 months to make that happen.
You go to some writer's residency again, right? Didn't you, weren't you at the a writer's residency?
Oh, I did the Headland Center for the Arts, right? Yeah. But they're undergoing some organizational change. I think the whole question of the survival of artist residency programs is actually much in the air. Many of them are really, really struggling right now. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that landscape's going to look like once we come out of this.
They'll be there. They'll
Mhm.
be just different. But but so in a sense, the pandemic has encouraged you to become an artist.
I love that you keep calling me an artist. It's a part of my self-identity. I have to like wear this a little bit. I have to try this on a little bit. Um, but I feel like I've been documenting it. So I feel like a documentarian, if you will. And there's a lot of power to documentary. I think of just capturing those moments, because we will, in 10 years, we won't have forgotten this period, but we won't remember it with the acuity that we feel it today. So taking the time to write it down and remember it lays a groundwork for people to be able to respond in a powerful way, if should this ever something like this ever happen again.
Well, not to be pushy or anything, Margie, but do you think documentary filmmakers are artists?
Oh, totally.
So let's use our logic.
Okay. So Stephanie, tell me more about like what you're thinking about for the Marsh in this period.
Well, I mean, it's been a creative spurt for the Marsh. It's like going crazy with all this stuff you can do digitally. That like I love doing interview shows, and now I get to do one. Or we wanted to have our International Solo Fest for years and years. And I'm sure I've mentioned that to you over the years, but way too hard to fit it into our 600 shows already. Try to figure out how to put a festival into it. But suddenly, because of this, with all the downsides, it was pretty darn easy to do an international solo fest. So upcoming, we're going to do another one. Probably we'll do it again in. We wanted to do it. We did it in October, which was kind of really fast, and we wanted to do it um, before the election. And now living through what's going on, I want to pat myself on the shoulder and say that was a good thing, Stephanie. That was a good thing to do it, but we would have liked more time. So we're hoping we might do another one where we have a little bit more time in, say, April.
Mhm.
You know, I don't want to wait a whole, I would never do it in October. So that and just all our shows and trying to see how to get to the other level. And the other thing is that one of the things the festival really made me focus on was the amazing work of people using the platform,
Mm.
Zoom platform or the digital platform, and how well solo performance translates to it. You know, there's probably not a better forum for translation, and it becomes the performance slash filmic view as we learn. So my interest is learning how to all the different aspects of each show and how to give them the best, uh, most aesthetic and artistic Zoom experience of these shows, and figuring out how to support our solo artists to do that.
I think that the March is sort of a living testimony to pivoting in this really difficult time. And I think that the arts organizations which have been able to pivot, and not all forms could pivot, let me be really clear, but those who can are building and growing their audiences. And I think that that really speaks to resiliency and thinking different, which of course you would expect the arts to lead on that, but some just have not been able to do that because they're really caught in their particular form. So yeah, I think we see that in pretty much every facet of life now, that requires people gathering together to do their work. So
Yeah, I think, you know, in what I've encountered, there amidst the solo performance community, there's people that really want to do it, and there's people that are like, no, no, I can't do it. It's like it's not comfortable for me to make this transition. I don't believe in it. I
mhm.
poo-poo it. It needs to be the way it was. And, you know, so it's been interesting to see that, and also those poo-pooers who now maybe they come on my show for the first time and they get a sense, oh my, this is not what I thought. It's not as bad as I thought it would be. And I'm like, if we're trying to translate theater, I don't want to translate a regular theater show and just put it on the screen. I want it to be translated so it is a production that works well within the context, which is so much what the March has been, is that we could do solo performance because it's an affordable, a much differently affordable art form than, say, a 10-person ensemble piece or a 5-person. So
Yeah, I think that, I personally get a level of dissatisfaction with looking at theater just being filmed and then shown, like on YouTube or whatever. If you don't adapt to the medium of film or Zoom or, the digital world, you get a different kind of product. It just is very flat to me. Whereas if you say, hey, I'm actually shooting a movie of this, I happened to see the David Byrne film that Spike Lee just did. And to me, he took a theater performance, but actually made it a video. I mean, you really had this whole other sense around that. So it's like you need the filmmaker's eye, I think, to make Zoom work.
yeah, and for me, it's on top of that. We just don't want to make a film of it. We want to engage and intersect the live aspect of the performance with the filmic possibilities of using either the, like when we saw Laurie Holt do Sylvia Plath, the incredible ability as an actress up close, giving you a different but an incredibly wonderful experience of seeing an excellent and amazing actress in your face and with a great script. So, you know, And then there's Marga doing stuff with amazing stuff with backdrops and, and how well her performance translates to
Yeah.
the Zoom platform stage, so to speak.
Yeah, but you have to think different about it.
Oh yeah.
And create a different level of intimacy, I think, between performer and audience, And it's also helpful if, like, you and I have known each other for a really long time, so we can just laugh together, right? And you have that richness of knowing all these people, so I think you know how to pull that out of the people that you're working with.
Yes. God forbid I have to interview somebody I don't know. What would I do? I might have to study up or something. Read an actual book about it or something. Well, Margie, it's time. It's 8:32.
Oh, okay.
Our hour has gone by so swiftly, and it's been such a wonderful hour and honor to have you on Stephanie's Marsh Stream. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will just say to everyone on this Zoom call, I give to the Marsh, and I would encourage you to give to the Marsh. It's remarkably unpainless, and you're supporting really great work in the community.
Thank you, Margie. And that's right, you can give to the tip jar. That would be great. And come back, and next week we are going to have Ellen Sebastian rebroadcasting. And the week after, we have Grant Faulkner, who's the founder of the, this is novel writing month. Write a novel in a month, right? 50,000 words. It's a whole nonprofit. So he's going to be on in a couple weeks. So I hope you'll join us for that and this weekend and the game show tomorrow night. Don't miss this game show with Don Reed, the smartest person in the room. I think they might be changing it to the best tool in the shed, whatever that, what is that? Best shed in the tool in the shed or something. Anyway, so join us for that, and Fitness Sing and Solo Arts Heal. And thank you very, very much. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Margie. Thank you, everybody who's helping out. And see you soon.
This is what free fall feels like. This is one of my worst nightmares, right? Oh, what a great audience we have. Tonight's show is about cancer warriors. The very serious and efficient nurse who's doing the procedure says, "You'll do well. You have the right attitude." I had no idea. I looked, felt, or acted positive. But I got her attention. When people learn you have cancer, they want to be helpful, but they can say the strangest things. Do you believe in miracles? You've got to stick with me. You're going to be okay. My acupuncturist cured my allergies. I'm sure he can help you with this. My friend's son, organic fruit juices for 6 months. No sign of myeloma in his blood at all. So Judith, so nice to see you in synagogue. Yep, we haven't seen you in a while, but that's okay. I want to remind you that the congregation prays for you every Shabbat. But I pray for you every night. Every night I pray for you. I don't even brush my teeth every night.